prat. He just goes live and then we just gotta like...
You should have got a fancier watch, then you won't be late.
So are we live now or... See, he never tells me. He never cancels in it. That's why I gotta always ask. He loves that. He loves that. He always asks. He always just waits for me.
I've got a microphone. It's tradition now.
Oh yeah, he's got a microphone now, so people can hear him. Fuck's sake.
That's finding the system.
Shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. Stephen, good to have you on the live stream.
It's a pleasure to be here. It really is. It really. It's been long overdue. We've been talking about this for a long time.
I know, and I've messed up a few videos.
I have to say, I mean, especially it's nice of you to take time out from your like extravagant trips all around the world.
Get the fuck out of here.
I mean, you know, we've been talking of doing this for months, and when you think about what's happened in the last month or so, we could have done this in probably the world's most exclusive cigar club in Monaco. We could have been doing this sipping champagne and eating canapes, or we could have been doing it sat on the beach in Aruba where you were last week, drinking little...
No, don't, with umbrellas
in it.
No, I know what you're getting at. I know what you're getting at.
Instead,
I know what you're getting
instead, we're doing it in the living room in Batley. I just want to say a big shout out to all those people who told me when I was young I wouldn't amount to anything, but look at me now in the living room in Batley. It's like, look, Mum, I made it. It's
not a living room, it's a professional studio.
It's a professional studio.
Tonight, Matthew, this is going to be a professional studio. Yeah, I feel like I've arrived.
I feel like, you know, like I knew you. You know what? No, I'm trying not to swear.
Okay, that's good.
I'm trying not to swear because you're here. I want to be professional.
Yeah.
But fuck off.
I was going to say, I was going to give you 3 minutes. You lasted 10 seconds. It's not a great start, is it?
No, it's not a great
start. If we're not starting at a high level of professionalism, how are we going to be in like 40 minutes time?
Well, you're in Batley. What do you expect?
I was going to say, and we're supposed to be talking about serious stuff today.
We are talking about serious stuff today.
So,
yeah, you've got notes. You've actually, come with research.
I've done some research.
This is rare.
Yeah, well, you also should have had notes, but you didn't print them out because you said...
No, I've got it on my phone.
You know, paper costs too much money. Is what I
yeah, Batley is expensive, isn't it?
Unbelievable. Rather than buy another pad of paper, you just go and buy another house.
It's right here.
Okay,
it's right here. You know, I've got it right here. I've got the notes. I studied these notes. I structured them. I put it together. I know what I'm looking at. But today we're going to be talking about two important things in the cigar industry. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking about Cohiba versus Cohiba. Well, Cohiba versus Cohiba. Because I think there's a slight difference in pronunciation if it's in America. And one of them's... but anyway, we'll get to that. And then we're also going to be touching on this notion of luxury, or this concept of luxury, and how it fits with the cigar industry, and what the difference is between Cohiba and Cohiba.
Yeah.
And how that plays into the luxury world.
Listen, it's really quite an exciting thing to discuss, because the simple answer would be, who cares? At the end of the day, who really cares?
Well, I was going to say, look...
But there are major implications to both sides, and it could have a significant impact on the market, and it's something that the industry, especially from the Cuban side, needs to be aware of. And certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, in my opinion, the Cuban side of things have really, really taken their eye off the ball regarding their branding and where they stand within the market. I almost feel like they're losing their identity.
Okay, but I want to quickly just say something. Cohiba have lost the trademark argument in the US courts multiple times. Mm-hmm. They've lost it almost every single time they've been taken to court. So they've lost it. You know, Habanos or Tabacuba have won, or Cuba Tobacco. They've won in every single instance. Why does this even matter now? Like it's already been done.
Sure. Okay, so first of all, can I light up a cigar?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah,
yeah. Okay?
Yeah. See, I'm finishing off my K.
And
I'm finishing off my K-Dose 50.
As you can see, I've brought a bit of a log with me.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to say, first of all, you've got to be impressed. I mean,
no, I was, but I'm also looking at it thinking, why?
You're looking at this thinking, this guy's never going to go home. No, he's going to be here for a week.
Which is fine, you're welcome, obviously.
This was a present bought for me for my birthday this year by my wonderful children.
Oh,
back
how
in
lovely.
February. Back in February, and I've been waiting for a really good opportunity to smoke it. And they bought it me in February when my wife and I were going on holiday to Dubai. And I thought, you know what a great opportunity. I'll smoke it in Dubai, and it didn't happen. I was smoking something else. Then we went away to Israel, and I thought I'll smoke it in Israel. Fantastic. Didn't happen. Then we went again. For some reason, each time I took it with me, and when this cigar was bought for me, not for a second did I think it would be smoked in Batley. I've got to be honest. I'm almost thinking that I'm letting my kids down a little bit here.
Do you want to swap?
I'm sure the kids are thinking, I'm not sure that was bought to be smoked in Batley, Dad. But at this point, my son is turning to my wife going, where the hell's Batley? And the answer to that question, I'm afraid I can't give you.
Well, do you want to swap? I've got...
No, you're all right.
No, it's a great cigar. It's a great
I
cigar.
had one of those last night.
Yeah, do you want to swap?
No, I'm all right, thanks.
Okay.
Can I trouble you for a cutter? Is that all right?
Yeah, just don't show the backside of this cutter, yeah?
Oh yeah, we would hate people think you're using a broken cutter.
It's fine.
Yeah,
It works, right?
That's exactly right. Okay, and we'll light this up. As Alex pointed out, this cigar is a notorious big smoker. So I could end up looking like that kid in Charlie Brown who's just forever covered in a plume of smoke. So you're just going to have to listen to what I say through the
smoke. See, this is why I'm still smoking my Quedose 50, because I'm not even going on to the other cigar because I know it's going to take you forever to get through that. But this is lovely.
Do you know what I love about these?
It tastes better with a DuPont, doesn't it? It does taste better with a
Don't
DuPont.
start
It
being
does,
all
it
clever
does though.
now that you're on a live
No, but he
stream.
does though, doesn't it?
He's just picked this argument since I've arrived. It's unbelievable. Yes, Usman, really, everything tastes better because it comes from an expensive lighter. I don't know, the quality of the fire is just so much better. He's just not going to let this go, is it?
No, because here's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Here's what it is. Last time when we did a live stream, right?
Yeah.
I got given a really hard time by Maisie, and she was talking shit about my cutters. It's like, oh, your cutters are all crap and whatever. And this time you come over and you give me a hard time about my lighter.
No, I'm not giving you a hard time
You
about
did give
the
me a
lighter.
hard time. We had like a good 10-minute, it was a 10-minute berating of my lighter.
Yeah, okay.
Just so you know, Josh Nearkin has decreed that Batley is as good a place as any.
Done.
I have
Done.
corrected him. But
I should like to point out that I don't believe my son has ever gone further north than Watford in his whole life. So I don't think he realises just where Batley is. But Josh, again, thank you to you and your sister for the cigar. The first puff was just absolutely superb, and I imagine it's only
How
going to get
sweet
better
actually
from
watch you guys.
Huh?
That's lovely, isn't it?
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Only so he can then say, I watched you. And I go, what did you think? Oh, no, I turned off after.
I'd do the same.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
Yeah,
I made a gesture.
Yeah, I came on for the intro. I'm not
Yeah.
going to sit through the whole thing.
No,
I've got
no.
stuff to do.
No, it goes online. I can watch it in
Exactly.
5-minute clips over the next 6 months.
Exactly.
That's it,
What were
yeah.
you talking about anyway?
Listen, at his age, does he think he listens to his father? There's no chance he listens to when I'm talking to him. I'm speaking to anybody. It's not going to happen. So you mentioned the legislation.
Yes.
And as I'm sure the people viewing are aware, and I know you are, there was a ruling in the States last week in federal court, which, as you said, Cohiba, I don't think we should really call them Cohiba anymore. We should call it like General Cigar lost.
Silencio.
Right? They lost.
It's actually called Silencio here in the UK.
Right.
So Silencio is their other brand, but I'm going to get to that later because I've got a point I want to make about that. But anyway, please continue.
And they lost.
Yeah.
And as a result of them losing, they have had the trademark of Cohiba removed from them.
Yes.
In America.
But
now,
they continue to use the trademark.
very much so. Well, no, they continue to sell the cigars. Right. Now, just because they have lost the trademark doesn't mean anybody else has acquired it, because you've got to remember, the Cuban cigar industry can't own trademarks
In the States.
in the States. Right? Now, you've got two conflicting pieces of legislation. I mean, you've got to love the Americans. So the piece of legislation that Biden signed into power back in 2004 is called the No Stolen Trademark Honored in America Act. I mean, that's very creative, isn't it? Some guy did a 4-year college degree costing $250,000, and they said, right, we've got this act we want to sign in. And said, what's it all about? Well, it's about not allowing stolen trademarks to be recognised in America. What do you think we should call it? Well, let's just call it that and put the word act at the end. You're a genius. You're a genius.
It's better than a big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, it's a great bill, right? And basically the purpose of this bill was to ensure that the Cuban government didn't benefit from any trademarks, Cuban trademarks, on American soil. Right? The problem with that act straight away is it doesn't apply to Cohiba. And the reason being is Cohiba can't be accused of being a stolen brand because Cohiba didn't exist at the time of the revolution.
Yes.
So as such, by definition, that piece of legislation does not apply to Cohiba.
Or Trinidad.
Yeah. Or any other Cuban brand that came
subsequently. Yes. So Cuba was one of them as well.
Exactly. So that claim is incorrect. There is a very, very old, in comparison, piece of legislation called the Pan American Trade Act.
Yeah.
And basically that blows the American position out of the water. And what it basically turns around and says is, if a country has already registered a product under a trademark in its own country, and you were aware of that trademark, you can't then use it within your own country. Now, amazingly, the lawyers for the Americans stood up in court and went, "We had never heard of Cohiba before we set up the trademark." Now, you are talking about, I mean, you've got to ask yourself.
That's some brazen lie.
You've got to ask yourself, like, how stupid do you think the judge is that you stand there representing a company that makes millions of cigars a year and say, "Yeah, I'd never heard of Cohiba before." we just picked the name out of thin air, and then the element of surprise that must have appeared on their face when she went, "Well, actually, I don't believe you.
It exists?"
Wow, who would have known? And as a result of that, needless to say, the ruling went against them.
Of course.
So, but as you said, what difference does it make? Because at the end of the day, regardless of who holds the trademark, Cuba Tobacco can't sell their original Cohibas into America.
Yeah.
And the US Cohibas can't be sold anywhere outside of America.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, no one's any better or worse off. So my initial question to you was, really, should we care?
Basically, yeah.
Right.
I mean, like you said, it's a closed system. The US, they've got an embargo against Cuba, so Cuba's not going to be selling any of their cigars in the States. And those Cohiba cigars, or Cohiba cigars in Europe, are not called Cohiba at all. They're called Silencio.
Right.
So they've got a completely different brand.
Of course.
And they don't operate in the same way. So it looks like, okay, fine, the trademark's been stripped from them, the courts have ruled, it's a win for Habanos. Why do they continue? One thing, why does Habanos or Tabacuba continue fighting this battle when they've already won 3 times? Second thing is, why doesn't General Cigars just let it go? Like, this is, with all due respect, this is now embarrassing. Mm-hmm. It's now got to a point where it's actually embarrassing. Like, they're just chasing after this brand that they want to use in the States, when everyone knows it's not the real thing. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows it's, in the politest way possible, it's a knockoff.
Yep.
It's not Cuban, so they can't go through the heritage. Mm-hmm. Why don't they just admit defeat, accept the ruling of their own court system, use Silencio, because they've already got precedence for that brand, and just, happy days, move on.
Okay, so we're going to answer that question through a game. You and I are going to play a game.
I don't want to play a game.
We're going to play a game.
Do I have to?
Yeah, I've put a piece of paper and a pen down there for you.
Oh, you've come prepared.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing here. Alex, I need you to time us for, let's say, 45 seconds.
Love a good bit of dead air.
All right? And anyone watching, grab a piece of paper and a pen. All right? And Alex is going to time us for 45 seconds.
So everyone's just going to hear me scratching on a piece of paper.
And you, me as well, okay?
First of all, why do I get this pen and you get that pen?
Life is unfair, mate.
I've got the Cohiba pen, you've got the Cohiba pen.
That's it. I'm here to teach you a lesson, mate. That's it. You know.
Luxury versus Vault.
Don't view it that I've got this pen and you've got that pen. Think you've got a pen.
Can we swap?
Huh?
Can we swap? This has got dirt on the end.
We could swap in theory, yeah.
But we're not gonna.
No. Okay. Are you ready? Not yet, because I don't know what they're writing down. I'm ready. When Alex says go, I want you to write down. Shut up. When he says go, I want you to write down as many chocolate bars as you can think of.
Shit.
Okay?
Go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Child crying in the background.
No, that's a cat.
There's a cat.
Yeah.
Go on.
Fucking hell. I think I'm just going through one brand.
If I was clever enough, I could play the countdown clock, but...
Chocolate bars. What did I buy earlier? Oh yeah, I know. My hand. If you can read my handwriting, I'll be very surprised.
15 seconds.
15
Okay.
seconds.
Left, I meant.
Chocolate bar. Well, they.
Oh my God! Don't. It's not a hard one.
It kind of is. Wait.
3, 2, 1, stop.
Okay. How many you got?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
That's because you practiced. You went in the store. You looked at all the bars in it. I had to just
Well,
think
it
of
also shows why, I'm probably close to being
1, 2,
borderline
3, 4,
diabetic.
5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8.
Okay. Now, it was just a little game. But when you go into, let's say, a service station,
Yeah.
and you go to the chocolate aisle,
Yeah.
and you want to buy a bar of chocolate,
Yeah.
and suddenly you look over and you are faced with a wall of chocolate. You are faced with a choice of maybe 50 to 60 bars, because in 30 seconds I just came up with half a dozen different ones.
Yeah.
I'm sure I missed out loads. Actually, let's see if did you get all of mine, and did I miss out any?
I got 12 Snickers, Crunchy.
Oh, 12. I didn't get 12, see?
Oh, Twix. I forgot Twix. I'm gonna write Twix down.
I got Mars Milky Way Galaxy, Snickers Maltesers Minstrels, Lindt Star Bar Boost, Cadbury's Caramel, Dairy Milk, Whole Nut, Fruit and Nut.
You can't do variations of the same thing.
They're different bars.
No, it's the same thing. It's just a different
Well, what's
flavor.
a bar?
Yeah, but it's like
Maltesers.
Maltesers make a bar.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay, but when you think about it, like if we sat there, we could probably come up with another 30 or 40 different names.
If I looked online, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about chocolate
No,
stuff, but
exactly.
I got 12 Snickers, Crunchy Dairy Milk, Galaxy Lion Bar, Malteser, and Kinder Bueno.
Kinder Bueno. You really are a
Yeah.
child, aren't you? Just buy it for the toy.
Kinder Bueno, not the Kinder toy.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Kinder Bueno's a bar. Kinder egg is an egg
Oh, okay.
with the toy.
So the problem you have is when you go in and face this wall of chocolate, there is so much choice. In fact, there is no choice at all. Your brain can't actually compute. It's called the paradox of choice. In other words, if you have too much choice, you can't actually decide what it is you want.
That's what happened to me earlier.
Right?
Yeah.
Now,
I stuck with Dairy Milk. I got the 12.
so we were talking about a website that I found earlier, a cigar website over in America. I was just looking earlier, on which they offered 500 different brands of cigar.
So not just cigars, 500 brands.
of cigar.
Damn.
Right? Now, how, if you are a manufacturer, are you going to differentiate your brand from everybody else's? Now, don't get me wrong, there are people, and we've seen it throughout the years. Good examples. Rocky Patel,
Yeah.
right? Alec Bradley,
Yeah.
Fuente, Opus X, who have spent huge amounts of money advertising, marketing, building up their brand to differentiate themselves from the rest.
Yeah.
That takes time,
Yeah.
that takes patience, that takes money. Alternatively, you can cheat. Now, I'm not sure you're old enough to remember this, but there was a film many years ago with Eddie Murphy called The Distinguished Gentleman. Did you ever see it?
No, I've watched a lot of Eddie Murphy movies. I haven't seen
It's
that
worth
one.
watching because
Is
it's
it good?
very funny.
Okay.
And basically, he plays a con man who realizes that he has the same name as a congressman, and the congressman dies. And Eddie Murphy somehow manages to get his name on the ballot sheet. And his running slogan is, Jeff Jeffries, the name you know. And you saw these people going to the ballot box saying, who do we normally vote for Congress? And they're like, oh, Jeff Jeffries. Not realising, instead of this guy who they voted for the last 25 years, they're voting for this con man.
Yeah.
This is exactly what they've done.
Well, Cohiba.
Exactly what they've done. They are the Jeff Jeffries. They have basically taken a name that everybody else knows.
Yeah, yeah.
People go into stores in America, and again, I don't think we're wrong in saying that the cigar smoking community in America is very different to the cigar smoking community, certainly in Britain.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. If you are faced with a wall of cigars, 500 brands, and you don't know anything about cigars, how are you going to know which one to pick? But if you see, let's say, a bar of chocolate that says Usman's Chocolate, you'll be like, oh, I know that name. Or if you see a name that you know, you'll be like, well, I've heard that name before, so I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah. I see
And
what you mean.
suddenly you see the name Cohiba and you think, well, I know that name.
Yeah.
Because everybody in the cigar world, or even outside of the cigar world, in fact, the only people who don't know the name Cohiba happen to be the lawyers of the cigar who've never heard of it before. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. But everybody else knows Cohiba, right? And therefore, what they are doing is they are circumnavigating that entire procedure of marketing, selling, creating their own brand. They are piggybacking off the back of the history of the Cuban
the Cuban cigar brand, yes.
Right? And don't get me wrong, if you can do it, why not? The problem being is, if you know people are going to buy that cigar because of the name, it doesn't have to be that good a cigar. You see, if you're Alec Bradley or you are Fuente, in order to build up your brand, it's going to have to be a good cigar.
Absolutely, yeah.
But if you're selling under a name that everybody already knows, and they don't know any better, yeah, I've heard of Cohiba, and it means it doesn't have to be a great cigar.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why they haven't changed the name. Because in that wall of cigars, they've still got a name that stands out.
Yes.
Now, you said that cigar is sold under other names outside of the US.
Yeah.
Nobody's heard of that name.
No one's heard of it.
So they're going to have to remarket the same cigar to the same audience under a different...
So it's going to cost them a lot of money.
It's going to cost them a lot of time. To build the brand. There's no history attached to it. There's no story attached to it. Then suddenly they're in trouble. So that's the reason why they don't change the name. And so long as the courts allow them to keep appealing the decision, they'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Now, there is no doubt, should the embargo with Cuba ever be removed, which at the moment is highly unlikely, but should it ever be, there is no doubt that the trademark would be returned to the Cubans.
Yeah.
Because, as we've already said, based on the previous piece of legislation, it doesn't stand up in court. But until that time happens, they just keep fighting it because they can sell cigars. So it makes sense to do so. So that's the reason why they're not
backing down. And it makes sense. And it makes sense for Cuba to keep fighting it, because the minute they let go, then they could stop. There might be some...
Well, it's quite interesting as well, because one could argue that there is a reason to let them keep doing it from the Cuban perspective. And that is, in the short term, it's not doing them any harm.
Yeah.
Right? Not only that, what they're doing is they're keeping the name Cohiba alive in America. Now, one day, if both sides see sense, the embargo will be removed, Cuba Tobacco can go back to selling, and everyone will look forward to finally tasting and enjoying a proper Cohiba. So what's actually happening is General Cigars are actually marketing for the Cubans indirectly as well.
Yeah.
There does become a problem, though. There does become a problem, and this is
the branding is different.
This is when it starts to get very interesting, and this is where Cuba Tobacco have to be very, very careful. And that is the damage that can be done to the brand because they themselves are not controlling it. Okay. As we said, there is nothing to say that the cigars that are being made under the Cohiba name are going to be any good. So if people start thinking in America that Cohiba aren't any good, then that could subconsciously roll into the Cuban brand as well.
Well, they're not. Those Cohiba cigars, they're not exactly known for being the best cigars produced outside of Cuba. You know, the best cigars produced outside of Cuba are generally considered to be brands such as Davidoff, Fuente, Padron, you know, Oliva. These are the brands that people look at and say, yeah, these are amazing cigars. I mean, there are obviously lots more, but, you know, for the sake of... You keep dropping the ash in the same place, don't you?
This time it's going on the floor. So,
but those are generally considered the best brands. Obviously, there's more, but I'm just, you know, highlighting just a very few key brands. And those are considered the best cigars that you can buy outside of Cuba. So if you've got those brands which are already considered the best, and then from Cuba you've got Cohiba, which is considered their best cigars and their best tobacco, then one could quite comfortably make the argument that the Cohiba cigars in the States are inferior. They're not as good as the best outside of Cuba, so they're certainly not going to be on the level of, let's say, you know, any of the Cohiba cigars you can buy off the shelf here in the UK.
So I'm going to say something which on the surface may sound controversial, and that is the actual standard of the cigar itself doesn't really matter. And I'm going to show you something. Alex will shout at me now because he gave me strict instructions not to move too much on camera because otherwise it'll blur it all up. But I'm just going to reach down here and I'm going to give you a cigar. Okay.
If it's that crappy cigar you made me smoke in your house, and I use the word made, what on earth is that?
What on earth is that? Okay, well, have a look.
It's a big chunky cigar.
It's a big chunky cigar. Okay. Right. Okay. So we're going to talk about something now.
Sorry,
we're going to
can I
talk
just
about.
put that next to my cigar? Look at what's the ring gauge? What the hell is this?
What the hell is this? He says. Okay. All right. So this. Okay. So when it comes to products have two values. They have an intrinsic value and they have a perceived value.
Yeah.
An intrinsic value is what it's worth. In other words, how much did it cost to make?
Yeah.
How much did it cost once you've brought in all the costs of production and marketing and distribution and all the rest of it. Intrinsic value, the perceived value is how much the consumer is prepared
to pay for
it.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I've just taken this out. This cigar is unbanded. And you have said to me, what the hell is this?
Yeah, because the ring gauge, I don't like it already.
Okay. Now let's put the bands back on. This is a Cohiba Robusto Supremos.
God damn. I knew it was going to be one of those expensive ones.
Right. So this cigar...
And you ruined it by taking the bands off.
Yeah, I know, but I was trying to prove a point, and it's worth doing.
It's an expensive cigar.
I looked up how expensive this cigar is today, and on the Davidoff website, this cigar costs £650.
God damn.
All right, you can buy boxes of them for $5,500. You pick them up at a discount. But the fact of the matter is, what is the difference between the intrinsic and the perceived value of this cigar?
See, immediately it looks better.
Had I taken this cigar out and handed it to you, you'd have gone, oh man, 2014 Cohiba, oh, Robusto Supremos.
I would have.
Right?
I would have been hyped. But then I would have complained about the ring gauge as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question to you is this. Where is the value in the cigar? Is the value in this cigar...
It's the brand.
Here? Or is the value in the cigar here?
It's there when you smoke it, it's there when you look at it. But obviously when you smoke it, you may not know that it's a Cohiba. So you still may not know what cigar it is, what limited edition it is, and so on and so forth. There's lots of individual things. However, I admit, when you look at it without the band, a cigar is a cigar.
Right. So the difference being is there is a significant difference between a product and a brand. A product products come and go every single day, right? A brand, if managed correctly, lasts forever.
Yes.
And this is the reason why the Cubans have to fight this case with Cohiba.
Yeah.
Because it is the brand that carries the value,
Yeah.
right? A Robusto Supremos isn't going to allow them to set up a diffusion range.
No.
My wife, who is a bit of an expert when it comes to all things fashion, is a big admirer of Victoria Beckham. And she was always a big admirer of her clothes. But she says what she's really done very well recently is branched off into other areas. And by all accounts, according to my wife, she has launched a very, very successful makeup range.
Okay.
Right? And you see this with a lot of high-end fashion brands.
Yeah,
You know,
they do.
their really high-end fashion is actually probably loss-making.
Yeah.
But all the accessories that carry the brand name, the sunglasses, the perfumes and things like that,
That's what makes the money.
that's what makes the money. That cigar isn't going to allow Cohiba to branch out and do other things.
Yeah.
It's the name, it's the brand. And that's the thing that they have to protect at all costs, because it's what the brand stands for. And at the end of the day, the brand stands for one thing and one thing only, and that is trust.
Yeah.
And if you have somebody else playing games with your name, then that trust can be destroyed.
Yes, because everyone, whenever you go into a cigar store and you see Cohiba, you trust that it's going to be tobacco from a particular region, it's made in a particular way, it's going to be a particular thing that when you smoke, you're going to get that level of enjoyment out of it. So, yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing to disagree with there.
And also, what's quite interesting, it's not even enough to have the band. I mean, we all know when you go to Cuba, there are people on the streets trying to sell you Cohiba, Cohiba, Cohiba. It's not enough for us to buy the cigar with the band on it. We need to know exactly where that cigar came from.
Yes.
We need to know that it came from, oh, I bought it from this cigar shop. Well, was it a Casa de Havana?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Was it a La
Probably fake
Casa?
it. Yeah.
You know, was it? Did you? If you bought it in the UK, did you buy it from a verified store?
Exactly.
And so on. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. All of
Right.
those factors play into as well. People look at the band. People look at the box code. They will search up the box code. They'll look at all the details on the actual box to make sure that it is a legitimate Cohiba cigar produced by Tabacuba, you know, and sold by Habanos to the importer and give. So there's like a whole thing where you can trace it back, and yeah, there's lots of individual things that people look at to make sure that it is actually a Cohiba cigar.
And that's not to protect the cigar. That's to protect the brand. And for that reason alone, even if they don't expect anything to come of it, they have to show that that brand means something to them. I mean, one thing I haven't seen, I don't know if you've heard, as you quite rightly said earlier, the same law that protects Cohiba also protects Trinidad by definition.
Yeah.
Do you hear them fighting Trinidad?
No.
The use of Trinidad in the court?
Not really. No.
No. And any other?
Well, no one's making. Well, there is a Trinidad version
Exactly.
in the States, but no one's really fighting that too much. Yeah.
Because the brand isn't something that they feel that protective over.
Cohiba's the flagship.
Exactly.
Trinidad is their second flagship. You could call it that, but it's not the same. It's not. Trinidad's Trinidad. Cohiba is Cohiba.
It's quite interesting for the very same reason why the Cubans should be fighting the Cohiba case is for the very same reason why they are making a mess of the brand of Trinidad. In other words, they have decided to elevate this, what was nothing more than a regional brand no more than 10 or 15 years ago.
It was a niche brand.
Very
That's what
much so.
It was literally called a niche brand.
Right. They've now decided to elevate it to being their number 2 brand. And although there is a shortage of cigars in Europe at the moment, you know as well as I do, if you walk into any cigar shop and go, oh, have you got this, that and the other? They'll go, we've only got 2 things.
Trinidad.
We've got Trinidad and Cohiba.
Yeah.
Why? Because only very rich people buy Cohiba. And even those rich people are thinking, why am I going to spend that money on Trinidad? Because I've been smoking cigars long enough to know that that's a niche brand. Now, don't get me wrong. Lovely cigars.
One of the best.
Right, love them.
I think Trinidad are generally better than Cohiba off the shelf.
Absolutely lovely. But again, we go back to that perceived and intrinsic value.
Yeah.
And what's called the value gap, which is the difference between the two.
Yeah.
can only be big for Cohiba.
Do you know what's crazy though? You say that, you know, anywhere you go, you'll find Cohiba in Trinidad. What's interesting to me is when I was doing a little bit of, and I put it in quotes, research. I wasn't doing research. I was just asking around a few of the retailers and and the importers. Cohiba continues to be a really, really good seller in the UK.
Yeah.
In fact, it was one of the top selling cigars last year in the UK for both for number of cigars and for value. Well, obviously, if it's number of cigars, it's going to be value as well.
Yeah.
But number of cigars sold, we're not just talking about the value of the cigars. Oh, the price went up, so obviously the value. No. Number of sticks sold.
Yeah.
Cohiba was actually number one in many areas. That's crazy. And the main one was Cohiba Robusto.
Yeah.
Which is relatively pricey. But people still love Cohiba so much that despite the massive price increase, they continue to buy those cigars. Now, is Trinidad in the running for any of them? No. It's nowhere near. You could go around Europe anywhere and you will find, even in Cuba. In Cuba, the few cigars that you will find on the shelves almost everywhere, it wasn't Cohiba. Cohiba was getting bought out everywhere.
Right.
You would find, actually, there were a few Cohibas that people wouldn't buy. Cohiba Panatellas, Exquisitos, and the shorts. Those you'll find everywhere. No one was buying them. However, you'll find Trinidad and you'll find the Linear series. Those are the cigars that you will find on shelves consistently across the board with virtually every single cigar store. They were not selling in the same way.
Well, if you look at which brand has seen the greatest price increase from where they were, you know, we've seen a gradual increase all the way through, but in terms of where they were
until where
they are
now,
now,
it's crazy.
You know, you buy a Trinidad Vejia and we only have to go back 5 or 6 years, and this was the same price cigar as a Cador say 50 or, you know, Partagas D4. Suddenly you're now telling me that it's 30% more expensive than all of these.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same cigar.
The Media Luna was $17.99. It's now £45, £50.
And there is no reason. Unfortunately, what Habanos don't realise is it's not for them to decide how large that value gap is between the intrinsic and the perceived. Well, only the consumer can decide. And the very fact now that they have got shelves and shelves of these things staying there, they are, for all intents and purposes, killing the brand.
I think that, and I don't necessarily agree with the mentality behind this, but when I was speaking to Tabacalera, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but they didn't say that I'm not allowed to say this. So when I was speaking to Tabacalera, they said that with Trinidad, it's a long-term plan. Because they're aware that Trinidad has a similar heritage as Cohiba. Not the same. Right. Cohiba has, you know, a little bit better.
Sure.
But it has a similar kind of heritage. It was brought in as a diplomatic cigar brand. It was one of those secret cigars, you know, the secret cigar from Cuba. Everyone was, you know, there was all talks and there was a little bit of hush-hush going on about it. And then it was made into a cigar brand that was producing standard cigars available for everyone to purchase. The Fundadores is basically the king of those. And what's happened is they're saying that Trinidad, in the next 5 to 10 years, people will forget that it was priced at, and I'm not saying people will forget, but people won't inherently think of the fact that it was priced at $17.99 and now it's priced at £50 or £60 or £70, because people will become used to this idea that Trinidad is expensive. So over time, it's not going to be a massive problem. And there is the case to be made that as much as most Trinidad cigars don't sell at all, the Fundadores sells out everywhere. But the Fundadores is the thing that has the heritage. It's not the Media Luna, it's not the Vejia, it's not the Esmeralda, it's not the Topaz. The Fundadores is the king of Trinidad. The Fundadores is the one that was the diplomatic gift. It's the one that had the gold band that came out and everyone was hyping.
But it wasn't the cigar that sort of transformed the brand. And, you know, it was the original limited edition Topaz. When that came out, it blew the market away because suddenly you had this niche brand and they released a cigar that was really, really exceptional.
Yeah.
And then from there they bounced to the Vejia again. Wonderful
exceptional
stuff. And you got excited.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all know as cigar smokers, every now and again, you get a cigar and everyone's like, whoa.
That's amazing.
You know,
and the Vejia did that.
You know,
the Topaz did that. The original Topaz,
the original
not the current.
Topaz, yeah.
The original Topaz did that.
And you were like, oh my God, this is actually changing my life. My life feels better because I have got this cigar to smoke.
It was an incredible smoke.
You know,
like when it came out, it wasn't even crazy expensive. You look at it and think, wow, a cigar of this caliber?
Yeah.
And this is why so many people were saying Trinidad is better than Cohiba. Because for that moment, Trinidad was in fact better than Cohiba. When I'm talking about aged Cohibas, because in my opinion, if you get an aged Cohiba, classic line, if you get an aged Cohiba, it's unbeatable. I have never smoked a cigar that tastes anywhere near as good as an aged Cohiba. It's just unbeatable. They are absolutely incredible cigars, the best. And obviously people will have different opinions. That's my thoughts on it. But when you just pick up cigars straight off the shelf, we're not talking about aging, just off the shelf, Trinidad or Cohiba, the Trinidads were just ridiculous, especially those ones.
The issue though is, as we said, the importance of the brand is that it is there to portray trust. And regarding Trinidad, I believe that Habanos have betrayed that trust. They have basically turned around and elevated a brand for no reason whatsoever other than to try to make more money off it.
I don't know if I can completely agree with that, because I do think that Trinidad has a lot of that heritage, and the Fundadores itself was one of those cigars that really helped build that perception of the brand, the heritage of the brand. It came in as a similar type of thing because it was the replacement of the Cohiba. So to have it elevated next to Cohiba, on paper it makes sense. Financially, with the way that it's been sold, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. I think that long term, I'm not too anxious about Trinidad, even in all honesty. I think that long term Trinidad will probably sit in its place and be okay. And I think that they're going to make a lot more cigars under the brand just to kind of fill it up a bit. But the Fundadores is still the Fundadores. That cigar is still undoubted. And even now, you go anywhere in the world, if you can find a Fundadores, people will buy it. People will buy that cigar. They used to be, what, $27.99? It's now £150 a piece in the UK, and people comfortably pay for them. Yeah. They come into Mitchell stores in London, and within about a week they're gone. And the number of cigars that they get is limited. So there is the case to be made that Trinidad could potentially get to that stage.
It just breaks my heart when you go into these shops around Europe and all you can see are these cigars piled high.
Yeah.
And you think, there was a time whereby
I could purchase that.
Literally, people would be fighting over these cigars. And it's not that they don't deserve to be elevated in price.
Right.
It's just the level to which they've been elevated in price has been completely out of whack with what everything else has happened. You know, they've pushed prices up significantly. And you've got to remember, the price rises at the moment are going absolutely insane. Yeah. So, you know, if you wanted to buy a Monte Cristo number 2 now, I mean, what are we talking about? 50 quid?
It's £50 in the UK,
right. £50 in the UK. Now, let's say you're like me and you're a 2 or 3 person cigar person a day. Yeah. You're now suddenly looking at it between 100 and 120 pounds a day. Yeah. A day. Well,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
You know, you can't afford that kind of habit, because as soon as your wife finds out you're burning 150 quid, you're giving 50% away of everything you've got in the alimony, because she's going to leave you. She's going to turn around and say, you're doing 150. Are you absolutely out of your nut? Right? So what you're actually doing is you're giving people no alternative but to look for cheaper alternatives. And the thing is, as people have pointed out, the New World cigar market now is not where it was 5-10 years ago. There are some very good New World cigars out there that are a fraction of the price, even in the UK.
Well, I'm going to make a counter argument to that. I'm going to say that's not entirely true, because when you're comparing cigars of a similar kind of level, so you say that, okay, fine, you know, a lot of people can't purchase Cohibas every single day, can't purchase Trinidads every day, Monte Cristos and so on. However, I find incredible amounts of joy from smoking a Juan Lopez number 2. Yep. I love that cigar. Yep. Not just love, I adore that cigar. When I see it on the shelf immediately just a little flutter, just like, ooh, there's a Juan
It's
Lopez.
still a £30 cigar.
But it's significantly less expensive than Cohiba.
It's still you smoke through 3 of those a day, you're still doing 90
Yeah,
quid.
you could find them a lot less expensive in Europe. Let's put it that way. But Cohiba you can't find less expensive in Europe. What I'm saying is the average price of Juan Lopez is a lot lower. The UK market kind of stands on its own. The UK market is the UK market, but we're looking at the overall market itself for Cuban cigars. So there are lots of cigars from Cuba that are really inexpensive, but offer a great amount of enjoyment. Diplomáticos is another one, and I think Diplomáticos is a fantastic brand. Quai d'Orsay is another brand, and I know that you love that brand as well.
I love Quai d'Orsay.
Quai d'Orsay is one of my favorite brands. I literally just smoked one, with you. And they're not crazy priced, but they are gorgeous cigars. So I think that there are alternatives within the Cuban portfolio for people who don't want to spend a great deal of money.
Yeah.
And when you compare those cigars, I think Cohiba stands on its own, and Trinidad potentially stands on its own as well. But when you compare Cuban cigars in general to New World cigars of equivalent stature, brands that people know, brands that are, good brands, prices aren't far off.
The difference being is, though, with the New Worlds, some of them are cheap enough that you don't mind trying them. So a new Cuban cigar comes out, and you say, "Oh, I'll try that," and they go, "Yeah, that's great." The Partagas that came out, that I've only tried one of, the blue bands.
The linear series,
Right, and you go, "Oh, I'll try one of those," and they go, "Oh, do you want me to light and cut it for you?" So, "Yeah, would you mind paying for it before we give it?" "Yeah, sure. How much is it?" 90 quid. What? Sorry, I wanted one. I didn't want a box.
But that's a linear series cigar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Again,
I get
just the band. It's just the band.
Yeah.
Right? They've decided it's 90 quid because of the band.
Yeah.
As we were discussing before we came on camera, the production of this is no different. It still cost them tuppence halfpenny. They're still paying the guy who rolled it like a Malteser and half a, pack of polos a month. Right? It's not like they're suddenly bringing in famous rollers from abroad or anything like that. The production costs are the same. They have decided that because of those bands, the price is going to go up. With New World cigars, some of them are cheap enough that you'll go, "You know what? I'll try that for 12 quid. I'll try that for 15 quid. And you'll go, "Okay, is it as good as my Quai d'Orsay? Is it as good as my Ramon Alones? Is it as good as my Juan Lopez?" Maybe not, but I'll tell you what, I don't mind substituting one out a day or 2 out a week, or 3, something like that. You're making people, especially at the end of the day, cost of living, no matter who you are and how wealthy you are, if you want to be a cigar smoker, it's going to cost you money. And sometimes you're going to have to turn around and say, well, I'm either going to have to stop smoking as much as I am, God forbid, or find a cheaper alternative.
But isn't that the point of luxury, though? And this is one thing we want to talk about anyway. Luxury is supposed to be that. It's supposed to be, gated. It's supposed to be something that is aspirational.
Yep.
So it's supposed to be that. If Cuban cigars are classified as a luxury and not the same as New World cigars, then you should be looking at Cuban cigars in that way, where it is kind of like, oh my God, they're a little bit pricier than I want to pay. Maybe I'll go for something else. Maybe I'll look for a more value, something based on value.
So what you're actually saying is, it makes sense, if we're going to go down the luxury item, that Cuban cigars become something that you smoke occasionally rather than all the time.
Effectively, well, potentially, yes.
So in other words, what I'm going to do is, every day I'm a chocoholic, we go back to that again, I'm going to live on a diet of dairy milk, but once a month I'm going to treat myself to Hoto Chocolat. Well, that's great. That's a good argument. But the sellers of Cuban cigars aren't going to be too thrilled about that. They're going to turn around and say,
Possibly.
No. And the problem being is, they're going to say, but you've always smoked 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
I know, but that was when I could smoke 3 of yours a day for 50 quid. Now you want £150. At some point, something's got to go. Because as much as I enjoy living on a diet of 3 Cuban cigars a day, my wife and kids haven't eaten in a month. Now, don't get me wrong, it's doing my wife's figure a great deal, but poor little Josh, he's fallen down the back of the sofa. He's getting to, you can't be realistic on these kind of things. You've got to turn around and say, there has to be a point where, if I'm going to indulge in this every single day, you can't just keep putting the price up on me and expect me to keep paying what you're charging. There's got to come a breaking point. We've seen it with Trinidad.
Yeah.
We've seen it with Trinidad.
We've seen the breaking point in Trinidad. maybe it's not the breaking point. I think that we still need. Time will tell with Trinidad. We're still a little bit early on with the brand. I think long term we'll be able to make a proper conclusion on that brand. So we still need time on that. But overall, there are plenty of other brands that I think are still well priced and still available. It's just the fact that Cohiba is not going to be a cigar that I can purchase on a regular basis, and I'm assuming many of my friends are not going to be purchasing Cohiba cigars on a regular basis as well.
And even if you could, would you? I mean, that's the thing. I'm very fortunate. If I wanted to, I could go out and buy a Cohiba cigar every day. But do I want to, or would I rather buy?
No, I would, because it's like
a Ramon Alones and 2K d'Orsay's for the same price.
Well, I buy cigars based on mood more so than. So I have I spend like a certain amount every time I purchase a cigar, and I don't like purchasing more than that. That's my kind of limit on what I want to spend. And generally speaking, I don't really find myself in the mood for buying a Cohiba cigar, because a Cohiba cigar has a particular profile which I enjoy, but it doesn't give me the same kind of enjoyment as, say, a Batley Maduro. And I love the Maduro. Yeah. It's strong, it's heavy, it's got a beautiful chocolatey flavor which you're not going to find in a Cohiba. And
apart from the Maduros themselves.
Apart from the Maduros themselves, yeah. But the Batley Maduro is also different. It tastes different. It is distinctly different. And don't get me wrong, Cohiba Maduro is some of the best cigars I've ever smoked.
Yeah.
But the Batley Maduro is distinctly different. The Monte Cristo series, the Especial, is distinctly different from the Cohiba Lancero. And the price points are very different, but they do taste different enough, significantly different enough, that I generally buy cigars according to my mood. And a lot of the times my mood is, my friends will say I'm a basic bitch. So my general mood is, Diplomatico number 2, because it's a very comfortable cigar. It's not as strong as the Monte number 2. It's a very comfortable smoke, same size, not as strong as the Monte 2, but lovely smoke. You can just sit back and enjoy that cigar. You don't need to think too heavy about it. I don't need to kind of think about, oh, this was an expensive cigar, so I need to do this with it. I need to juggle about with it or anything like that. So I think that definitely comes into play. The fact that the price impacts my perception on how I enjoy the cigar.
So I have a very dear friend called Danny, and Danny used to smoke with me every single night. And before I built my cigar den, we would go for a walk every night together, walking his dog. And when the Cohiba Maduros first came out, we were big buyers, and we would go and smoke every single night, walking around our area, Genios.
Gorgeous cigar.
Absolutely blinding cigar.
Incredible.
Absolutely blinding cigar.
Agreed.
But as we smoked them over a period of time, the prices kept going up, kept going up, kept going up. And one day Danny turned around to me and said, we've just done 40 quid. And I was like, yeah. Right? And he's like, not sure I can really. In other words, it gets to a point whereby you're thinking more about the money that you've just set a light to, because the actual value you're getting from the cigar doesn't increase as much as the price. It's the same cigar you were smoking 2-3 months ago when it was £25. The fact that cigar today is what? I mean, how much is a Genios now?
It's about 130.
I mean, now I've still got Magicoses at home. I don't know whether to smoke them or insure them.
Well, what I want to do is we're going to take a little comment break. We're going to look at if we've got any comments, nothing with that.
People have been following along, but no questions yet. I did ask.
Okay, no problem. In that case,
except
we'll
for
continue.
What you're smoking. Except for asking what you're smoking.
Oh, I'm smoking the UK Regional Selectos number 3. I still got a bunch of these left, so I thought I might as well smoke one of these. I don't think my cigar's going to last anywhere near, because you're talking a lot more than I am, so you're obviously smoking less than I am as well. No, it's a good thing.
I think I'm burning through this at quite.
I don't know.
I have to say, it is fantastic.
It's a great cigar.
It's absolutely, and it's. I think what really makes it is the location. This is the setting.
Fuck you,
I mean, this would have been wasted in Dubai or on the beaches of Tel Aviv. Why would I want to do this in 35-degree heat when I can do this with the windows open, freezing my bollocks off? It's much more fun.
I could turn the heating on.
It's great. People are thinking he's shaking because he's nervous. It's -4 in here.
You've got a jumper, mate. Chill out.
Just saying, which I wasn't going to mention it, but it's so good that we're going to talk about, luxury and prestige
Yeah,
cigars.
but I want to.
And you made such an effort to dress. I mean, you turned up in your slippers.
I did turn up in my slippers. I forgot. I was supposed to change my shoes before the live stream.
I put on, shirt, proper trousers, dress shoes.
Is it on camera?
The camera can't quite see your socks.
They can't see my new socks as well.
They can't see
They
it.
can't see it.
Can you see my socks?
They can see yours. Yeah.
Yeah, I came prepared with these socks.
Yeah.
Look at these bad boys.
Can they get his slippers as well?
Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
damn shit! What about now?
He's the only person I know with tasseled slippers.
No, it's unbelievable.
They're not
right?
tassels.
The geezer's sitting here talking about cigars that cost thousands of pounds. And he looks like he's out selling copies of The Big Issue. It's like, how are you going to be taken seriously?
Why did I invite you on again?
We're supposed to be talking about cigars. We're supposed to be experts in our field. We're supposed to be encouraging people to engage with us, and they're looking at that guy going, "What the hell do they bring Stig of the Dump on the show for?" It's like, what the hell's going on?
Because when you're smoking a cigar, you need to be relaxed.
Oh right.
You need to be relaxed. It's like it's a matter of enjoyment, and these slippers are very comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Oh, good. Okay.
My feet are like wearing clouds right now.
Brilliant.
Yeah. How are your feet feeling?
They feel as cold as the rest of you.
Mine are pretty warm. I'm toasty.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I'm
marvellous.
feeling great.
That's because you're from up here. That's what it is. This is probably summer for you.
It is, yeah.
Frosty the Snowman's just gone past the window.
Mate, it was freaking way too hot in Aruba.
My heart bleeds. It really does. Is that why we didn't do the show there? Wow, those little drinks with the umbrellas in. No, we didn't want to do that.
The cameras would have melted.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Great.
So I want to go back to Cohiba versus Cohiba.
Yeah.
So there were a few points that I think we needed to cover, which we started talking about Cohiba as a brand and as a luxury. But I want to go back to Cohiba versus Cohiba before we start talking about the difference between luxury and the premium aspects when it comes to cigars. So there were a few things where the main thing I wanted to talk about was that Cohiba, and you did cover this, they've got their brand over in the States and they're going to continue using that brand. Long term, they're going to have to change. It's going to get to a stage when the appeals are going to run out, when hopefully a judge with a little bit of sense is just going to say, look, this is getting out of hand now.
Yeah.
This is the final ruling. Take them off the shelf. Stop selling them. And they've already been ordered to take them off the shelf.
It's never going to happen.
But they keep appealing.
It's never going to happen.
You don't think it's going to happen?
It's never going to happen until
the embargo
removes, and especially given the anti-Cuban feeling that.
But they've already been ordered to remove the stock.
Yeah.
So
no. They've been told they've lost a trademark.
Right.
They've been told they've lost a trademark. The trademark hasn't been awarded to anybody else. Now, as I said to you, I don't know where that leaves the trademark in America. And
So does that mean that you and I we could just fly over to the States and start selling Cohiba cigars?
I contacted a lawyer friend of mine today to ask him that question, and he didn't have the answer. But in theory, if nobody owns the trademark
in the States,
then that means you and I can go over and start selling cigars using the Cohiba name, because we're not infringing on anybody else's trademark. Now, the only difference is, in time, the Cubans will come after us as well, quite rightly so. But were the Cubans to turn around and go, Usman, Steve, buddies, go on,
mess with them,
go and just do it for shits and giggles, just to annoy them, I don't think they could stop us.
They couldn't, could they? Because they don't own the trademark to be able to stop us in the first place.
Exactly. So on that basis, we could literally go over and sell the best cigars in the world, or even more fun, sell the absolute worst cigars in the world, make sure that they were put on the shelves next to the existing non-Cuban Cohibas, and basically completely destroy the brand in that country.
We could use this, not the same branding, but just a similar branding. We could go down the route of parody laws.
We could just reban some Hamlets.
Yeah, we could reban some Hamlets. We could go down the route of parody.
Yeah.
And then just mess with them.
Do you know what I could do? I could get all the stalks that I pull out my cigars, and we could just start rolling those.
No, we're not going to talk about that. No, we're not going to talk about that. You were banned from talking about that one.
No, I've not pulled anything out.
No, you haven't. Leave it alone. Okay, I don't want to watch you chew on a cigar.
And neither do your audience.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No one wants to see that.
It's going to do an intermission break. Start making balloon animals out of twigs from the cigar.
You haven't got many twigs in yours, have you?
No, it's absolutely superb.
Yeah, mine too. Not a single one.
Well, if you get a twig in that, it's going to plug.
Yeah.
I actually smoked one of those yesterday.
It's a bit of a tough
and
draw this time.
I did pull out a twig from one of those yesterday, and I was like, blimey, that's the size of the twig in relation to the size of the ring gauge. I was like, that's a bit disproportionate. But
Extra flavour.
Yeah, exactly. Get an aneurysm trying to suck through. There's no draw whatsoever.
I don't know why. You know, this is another thing. A lot of people complain about the draw of Cuban cigars. I like the tough draw.
I never understand that.
Why?
Nothing gives me greater pleasure than lighting a cigar and taking that first puff and just getting a mouthful of flavour. Like the easy, lazy draw of just like. I love that.
Then smoke Padrones.
Yeah, because then you take that first easy draw and blood shoots out your eyes. It's like, because it's just so strong.
It's
like,
not that strong.
Hello? It's like, oh, God almighty.
You'll go blind.
I was going to say, it's like someone squirted vinegar in your eyes. It's like, oh, no, I can't be doing it. It's just way too...
Well, I know that you generally prefer, in fact, not even generally, you absolutely prefer Cuban cigars over New World cigars. And I've had conversations with you where you've been pretty brutal about many of the New World cigars. But one of the points that you made was that Cuban cigars are a luxury. Cohiba more specifically is a luxury brand. New World cigars currently, there are no luxury brands outside of Cuba when it comes to cigars. And this is the point. When we first had that discussion, in fact, the very first conversation we ever had all those years ago, the very first conversation we had was, I said, well, Fuente could be classified as a luxury brand. I mean, Fuente, you know, they have collaborations with, you know, brands like Hublot, and, you know, they price that, you know, really high and so on. And there's a massive following behind them, and Fuente makes some fine cigars and so on and so forth. And we had a detailed discussion where you broke down why Cohiba is a luxury brand and why Fuente is not a luxury brand. And this was something that I found really interesting.
Okay, so first of all, let's make it clear that this is not my opinion.
No. Okay, this is not your opinion.
For those who don't know, I wrote a thesis for my MBA many years ago on the Cuban cigar industry and what Habanos should do were the United States to remove the embargo with Cuba. And it was a strategic marketing paper.
And Habanos invited you over to Cuba.
They did.
Because they liked your thesis so much.
They did. I got to present, first of all, to Hunters and Franco. I was blessed, and it was a real privilege to be mentored for that by the late, great Simon Chase.
Yes.
Who, anyone who knows Simon knows, he was by far and away one of the foremost cigar authorities in the world, but he also didn't suffer fools gladly.
No.
He was never, he was not shy in making his thoughts known.
Yeah. And
to have been mentored by him and for him to read it and go, okay, there's something to this was a tremendous honour.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember sitting in the Hunters and Franco boardroom for 4 hours with Gemma Friedman, with Jimmy, Anna Lopez, a whole bunch of them, and they all had a copy of the paper in front of them, and they'd all written notes as well. And I was grilled for 4 hours on that paper. And at the end, they turned around and said, yes, there is something here. This needs to be sent to Cuba. So it was sent to Habanos, and they invited my wife over and myself over, and we had a day at El Laguito.
Amazing.
And I got to meet the master blender over there. We had some great fun, and then I presented my findings to them. And there is a whole chapter in the paper regarding what differentiates Cuban cigars from New World cigars, and the concept that under the parameters set by certain academics, and the main source that I quoted was a marketing expert called Jean-Noël Capra, who's a leading PhD from Northwestern. He's written many books on marketing and in particular luxury. He sets out 5 criteria that defines what luxury
Is it 6
truly
or 5?
is. 5.
Okay.
And he set out 5 criteria, and unless you meet all of those 5, you cannot be described as being a luxury brand. Now, that doesn't mean you're not luxury. What it means is you are premium. Because instantly, as soon as people say you're not a luxury brand, people get negative connotations. You know, and they say, well, if I'm not luxury, I must be rubbish.
No.
It means you're not luxury, but it does mean you are premium.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were discussing before, Alex, before we went on camera, a good example of a good premium brand is Lexus.
Okay.
Right? A good example
The
of
car
a premium,
manufacturer.
the car manufacturer, right? And when you look at what those 5 parameters are, Lexus tick the boxes perfectly in terms of why they are not a luxury brand, but there's no doubt they make great cars, you know. But the fact of the matter is, if you go into Lexus tomorrow and say, I'd like to buy 500 Lexus.
So wait, why is Lexus, what are you comparing it to say that Lexus is not a luxury?
So let's say Rolls-Royce or Ferrari or Mercedes or firms that have got, I mean, we know, because we've discussed it, the 5 criteria.
Yeah. But why does Lexus specifically not meet the criteria?
Predominantly from when they launched their product, their biggest selling point was to compare themselves to their competitors and show why they were better value. So in other words, their initial marketing campaign in many countries was to say, if you buy a Lexus, you get all of these extras for free. But if you buy a BMW, Audi or Mercedes, the same extras will cost you X, Y and Z.
Right.
One of the parameters for being truly luxurious is you never compare yourself to your competitors.
You stand on your own 2 feet.
You stand on your own 2 feet.
Right.
Right. And prior to coming on air, I showed Alex a Mercedes advert that basically turned around and said, the best knows no comparison. That sums up luxury. So, you know, when Rolls-Royce advertise their cars, they don't make no mention of Bentley.
Yeah.
You know, buy a Rolls because we're better than Bentley.
They don't do that.
You know, Rolex, don't say buy a Rolex because we're better than AP.
Yeah.
You know, likewise, they don't mention
the others, yeah.
Right?
So, well, in fairness, Fuente, Padron, they don't say, well, buy a Fuente because it's, you know, we're better value than Cohiba or better value than a Cuban cigar.
Absolutely.
So they don't say, our cigars, buy our cigars because they're better value for money. Yep. They don't do that. They kind of, they present themselves as Fuente. They present themselves as Padron.
Yep.
So why is that the same?
So again, when I said at the beginning there were 5 criteria, and to be truly luxurious, you have to meet all 5 of the criteria. So the first of those criteria is history. Right?
Well, could argue that Padron.
Now, I agree with you. At some point in time, who is to say how long a company or a business needs to be in business before it can say we've, you know, I was somewhere a few weeks ago. I was walking past a shop and they said established like 1986, and I'm thinking, that wasn't that long ago. I was 16 back then. Yeah. And then I'm thinking, well, hold on a second. That's almost 40 years.
How old are you? I'm kidding.
Do the math.
I'm kidding.
Do you need to borrow some fingers?
Well, thinking, for that, yeah, I do.
And you're thinking, well, hold on a second. 40 years is quite impressive. You know, 40 years is quite impressive. So, yes, at some point in time, companies like Padron and Fuente are going to say, well, hold on. We've been making cigars for this period of time. We believe that constitutes the right to say that we have a history. You then look at Paul Arellano or H. Upman and you think, well, hold on a sec, these guys have been making cigars for hundreds of years. Yeah. Right? But time doesn't stand still. It's not like Fuente are ever going to be able to catch them up.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have a history themselves. So again, at some point in time, there is an argument to be made that they will tick that box. Now, I don't know when that time comes, and I think that's for each person to decide for themselves. Another argument is that supply can never equal demand. Now, I know there are certain Fuentes that are made in limited amounts,
Yeah.
but when it comes to New World cigars, I'm not looking at individual brands, I'm looking at the whole concept of New World cigars. There is no shortage of New World cigars being pumped out. The very fact that I think America imports close to 500 million hand-rolled cigars a year.
Yeah, something like
And
that.
we talked about the fact that there are shops that are offering 500 different brands.
Yeah.
There is no limit to the amount of supply that can be produced. So if need be, let's say there's a run on a certain particular cigar, they call up the factory and say, we're sold out, roll us another 3,000 boxes, they can probably do it. You can't do that with Habanos.
No.
You can't do. There is a finite amount of tobacco that can be rolled because it has to come from Vegas Fina fields, right? It has to come from a specific area. It has to come from the top end of those fields.
Pinot de Rio.
Right,
It has to come from those.
right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
there's
It
only
can't be
a
tobacco
finite-
just from Cuba. It has to be from tobacco from Cuba, from a particular region.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. So there is a finite amount, and we know that Cuba export. I mean, when I did my thesis, I think they were pretty much towards the top end of their production, which was like 90 million. I don't
They're
know
nowhere near that.
They're nowhere near that now.
They were like about half that.
You know. Now, you said to me earlier, I think we had this discussion, you said Padron only released something like 6 million sticks a year.
Yeah.
And I said, but hold on a second, that's close to 10% of what Cuba's pumping out in total. So you're saying Padron's a small house in terms of production.
Well, relatively small.
You
It's
know.
not a small brand per se, but they produce relatively small amounts. Yeah.
You know, but if we looked at a brand like Macanudo, or we looked at some of the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
Olivar,
But then, do you think it's fair to use the capacity and the number of cigars that are produced through outside of Cuba to individual brands? Because then you could say, well, the cigar industry produces this many cigars, and Cuba's just part of it.
I think as time goes on, I think there is a chance that the top end of the New World cigars, so you're looking at the Fuentes, you're looking at the Padrons, will definitely have a stronger argument to turn around and say we are a luxury brand. However, you also have to understand that in America, they don't care.
Luxury doesn't
'cause
necessarily, it's not appreciated in America in the same way.
You've got to remember, in America, they are a consumer-driven society. So what they are interested in more than anything else is value.
Predominantly,
Right.
but of course, luxury has always been consumed by a smaller percentage of a smaller percentage.
You know, can you think, I mean, maybe you can, but can you think of one truly luxury brand that has ever come out of America?
Not really. The only brand that I can think of is Tiffany's. That I think is the only brand that could be classified as an exception, because every other luxury brand in the world is European,
Right.
except for maybe Cuban cigars.
And luxury is associated with Europe.
Yeah. But then America does consume more luxury than anyone else. They purchase more Swiss watches, and I'm talking fine Swiss watches, than anyone else in the world. They consume more cigars than anyone else in the world.
Yes,
And
but
about-
the cigars they're smoking are not luxuries. You know, the
No, but-
cigars they smoke, they're smoking while they're fishing, while they're shooting, while they're
But
playing golf.
then what I'm saying is, the US consumes, or the US will purchase more watches than anyone else in the world.
Yep.
But then of those watches, the US is also consuming or purchasing more of the luxury watches as well. So, I don't think it's necessarily completely fair to look at the US and say, well, they consume just value products, because there are distinct areas of society in
Right.
America that actually consume a lot of luxury.
Right.
So
So there was a paper written, and I'm afraid I hadn't looked this up before we came on. And I remember one of the authors was a guy called Laurent, and there were 3 other authors as well. And they basically defined the different types of luxury and the different types of consumers of luxury. And in America, they would be classed as the postmodern type of consumer. So in other words, they are buying a luxury item, but they don't know why they're buying it. They're buying it because they want to be seen to be owning it.
So it's signaling.
Right. So in other words, they're not buying it because what the product itself stands for. They're buying it because what impact it will have on how people view them. So in other words, if you buy, let's say, a Monet and you hang it in your living room, you have bought that Monet not so you can invite people around to show everybody you've got a Monet.
You would buy it because you
want to admire it and you want to appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, in the American market, they're buying this stuff so they can turn around to people and say, "Hey, you want to come around and see my Monet?"
So it's more about signaling disposable cash.
Very much so.
Right.
Very, very much so.
Okay.
Now, the absolute opposite to that, the purest form of luxury, is a Japanese term, which I think we've discussed about before.
Yeah. Wabi sabi.
Wabi sabi.
There we go.
Right. I remember when my university lecturer taught me about this, I was just blown away.
It's a weird word.
It is. And wabi sabi basically means in the moment. So what is true luxury? True luxury is an experience that cannot be relived. So when you're on top of a mountain and you see that perfect sunrise,
yeah,
or you see a flower bloom, or you see something that was only in the moment,
yeah,
you know, when you've received a wonderful piece of news and you go outside to have a cigar, right, and you take that first draw and you've already got that euphoria from the excitement of the news, it's that one moment that is truly luxurious. And that's exactly the opposite of what the American market is. The American market is, I want to own something because what it says about me.
Right.
Whereby in Europe, luxury was set up because what it says about the actual product. You know, you look at a Chanel dress, it is a work of art. You know, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. If you look at any Chanel dress, you will find a stitch here or there out of place. Why? Because it's handmade. You know, it's not meant to be perfect, but it's
meant to be art. It's not meant to be perfect.
But it will be a work of art. You know, and people will look at it and they will go, "Oh my God, look at that."
Yeah.
You know, but because they are a consumer-driven society, they don't care about the history.
They'll ask how much it cost.
You know,
how much did that cost, as opposed to actually appreciating the work of art.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So based on that, what you're suggesting, or what I'm understanding, is that the whole mentality in America is different, and because of that, the cigars that are produced outside of Cuba, they are inherently produced for the US market. They're not produced for Europe, because maybe like a few % of their stock levels eventually make it to the European market. So they're not producing for the European market, they're producing it strictly for the US market. So all these Opus X's, all these Padrones, which are, you know, really high end, like the, you know, the family reserves and so on, they're produced with the American market in mind. So if they're producing it for that market, then inherently it's lacking a certain level for it to get to that artistic, for it to get to that level of luxury that a lot of European brands are producing for.
But I was in Liverpool. I was in Liverpool towards the end of last year. I went to puffing rooms there. Yeah. And there was a box of cigars. I think it was a Rocky Patel box, or maybe it was a Placencia, or it was a New World box. And this box came in this unbelievable, like, lacquered humidor.
Placencia, I remember.
Right? And they had these gold wrappers on it and all the rest of it. And it was like £100 a stick.
Yeah.
And it was £100 a stick because of the dressing that they put on it. You know, don't get me wrong, it was still a donut, but it was a donut in a very nice dress. But that doesn't make it anything more than a donut, and it doesn't entitle you to suddenly turn around. But what it is, because it looked good, you know someone is going to buy it in a consumer-driven market to put it on a shelf and say, look what I've got.
But couldn't you say the same thing about Cohiba? Because that's the point that you made earlier. When you opened up your box, you unbanded the Cohiba and it showed it to me.
Yeah, but the difference being is the consumer decides on that value gap. In other words, you can charge a high price based on what the consumer has agreed to pay.
Right.
Right? And that is tied to the history, that is tied to the aesthetic.
Right, I see.
That
so
is tied to the fourth one, which
people
is
are still
quality. You decide you want to, I don't know, make a Rocky Patel and start charging people 50 or 60 quid for it just because you've decided, doesn't mean anyone's going to buy it.
Yeah, because Cohiba, you could put it on auction and it will still sell for thousands.
Because they've earned their place in the market. Now, I am not saying that Fuente and Padron aren't there. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I don't think they really care.
Okay, I've got a question which is going back to the comparing of your brand to another brand. Now, I mentioned that Fuente doesn't necessarily say, you know, buy our cigars because we're better value than Cuba. However, a lot of them do talk negatively about Cuban cigars when it comes to production.
Yeah.
So there's two things that a lot of the brands do. And the first thing is they compare their cigars to Cuban cigars when it comes to consistency of the production.
Yep.
You will never find a plugged Fuente. You'll never find... now, Davidoff doesn't compare themselves to Cuba. And that's one thing they've done well. So I think Davidoff may be a little bit of an exception. I'm going to keep them out of this discussion for a bit. But every other brand, they will always say, our cigars are produced better. You're not going to find a plugged Fuente. You're not going to find a plugged Padron. But Cuba, their production is really bad. They don't have any draw testers or anything to that extent. Or if they do have draw testers, they don't use it. And so, yada, yada, yada. And the other thing they do is that Fuente will always go back to their heritage in Cuba. And they will say, they will use terms like Casa Cuba when they're branding their cigars.
Yeah.
Or they will use some element of Cuba in their branding. Same as Padron. Like Padron, when you look at their new SD DuPont lighters, when you look at their logos and so on, they've got the country of Cuba as their emblem.
Yeah.
And you think, well, you're making cigars in Nicaragua, but then they're saying, well, we are Cuban. We're from Cuba. So we're harking back to our heritage. So for us, it's an important aspect of who we are. Now, do you think that negatively impacts them when it comes to being classified as a luxury?
I don't think it negatively impacts them because I honestly believe for the market where they sell the majority of their sticks, it doesn't matter.
No. We're
But
not talking
in terms
about...
of if we are trying to define them,
Yes.
then they have broken one of the cardinal rules.
So they have. So
So.
But then they're not really comparing their cigars to say that, we're better than Cuba. They're simply using aspects of Cuba as part of their branding.
But as you said, they're always the first to turn around and say, but our cigars are perfect, our production is better. You're always going to find a couple of cigars in a box of Cuban cigars that don't draw, which, let's face it, is not inaccurate. But again, as I said, one of the laws of luxury is it's not meant to be perfect. It's a handmade product.
Yeah.
You go to some of the greatest furniture manufacturers in the world and you go to them and say, I want you to make me 2 chests of drawers, right? And they make you these 2 cabinets. They're not going to be identical.
No.
The wood isn't identical.
No.
So if the wood's not identical, how can the cabinets be identical? And you're thinking, but hold on, I told you to make 2. But I gave them both the same time. I gave them the most same expertise. I gave them the same love and attention. But the materials are different.
Yeah.
Everything's different.
Well, even if you look at Ferrari, I mean, Ferrari is and can be classified as a luxury brand.
Yes.
But a lot of it is just glued together. It's like it's not made, like, for example, Lamborghini. I don't think Lamborghini is a luxury brand in the same way, because Lamborghini inherently started because they wanted to produce a better car than Ferrari. They started with this mentality of we're going to be better than Ferrari. So they weren't producing cars because they wanted to produce the best. They produce cars because they're like, we can make better than Ferrari. So immediately compare themselves to another brand, and then they went off and produced their own. So I think that relegates them to premium and not luxury.
So let's look at a different car brand. Let's look at Aston Martin.
Okay.
Right, Aston Martin, who I definitely would class as a luxury brand. Right? Now,
You don't, or you do?
I do.
Okay.
I do, right? Every person who drives an Aston Martin, the only thing they think of when they get behind the wheel, when they first get in the morning is, please start. Just please start. It's cold outside. And they get in there knowing that there is a good chance that the AA is going to be their first port of call in the morning.
Okay.
Right? They know that. And yet they still went out and spent 165 grand on the car. They know it's not perfect, right? Does it make it, this is the wonderful thing about brands, and this is the importance of a brand. Rolls-Royce, let's say, come out with a car, and all the critics go out and test it, and they come back and go, it's a crap car. What are the chances it's a crap car? It's not a crap car. What it is it's a crap Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, your expectations of what this car should be, because it's a Rolls Royce, were there,
Yeah.
and it only reached that sort of level. That doesn't make it a crap car. That makes it a crap Rolls Royce, which goes back to our example of the wrappers. The perceived value of what I expect from this brand.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, what I expect from this brand. So you have to put these things into consideration. And the fact of the matter is, what do you want from? Oh, hello, we've got a visitor. What do you expect from these things? And you have to appreciate the fact that luxury will not always be perfect, but that doesn't mean you can't appreciate it for what it is.
Agreed. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's
So
it.
so this mechanization, this kind of manufacturing for perfection in the new world cigars, do you think that damages it? Not damages it, but do you think it relegates them from luxury to premium?
Yeah, but I think even if you pick up any cigar aficionado, they refer to hand-rolled cigars in America as a premium cigar. That's how they are referred to.
Yeah.
They refer to the market in America of handmade cigars as being premium cigars.
Premium
and that's
cigar.
exactly where they belong.
Yeah.
That's exactly, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm gonna, sorry for interrupting, but going back to what you said about quality versus, quality versus perfection. And this is something that we had a discussion about. If you buy a Patek Philippe, it's going to be potentially the best timekeeping watch, mechanical or automatic watch that you can purchase. It's going to be very accurate, very good in what it is, but it's never going to be as accurate or perfect as an Apple Watch.
Right.
An Apple Watch is going to be far superior in terms of functionality, features, and all these things that it can do, but it's not a luxury product.
Sure.
And it is, for all intents and purposes, a better timekeeping device than a Patek Philippe.
And you know what?
But it's not luxury.
I understand, but you could go down to Hermes and buy a Birkin bag for £30,000. My wife is now screaming into the screen, going, "Well, go on then, go and buy one. It's our anniversary next month." It's not happening. It's not happening. Or you could go down to Tesco and get yourself a bag for life. And you know what? Your groceries fit into both of them.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe the bag for life is better for carrying groceries than the Birkin.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make the bag for life better.
No.
Because it doesn't come with the history. It doesn't come with the aesthetics. It doesn't come, with the.
But this is exactly what I'm saying. Patek Philippe is the luxury watch where people will pay hundreds of thousands for that watch.
Yeah.
No one's going to spend 100,000 on an Apple Watch.
No.
And if they do, then I mean, come on, man, what are you playing at?
Yeah.
It would be crazy.
If they do, come and see me. I've got a bridge in London you can buy. That's all. But that's it. It's not about the functionality.
It's not about
It's going back to the value gap.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's going back to the value. The perceived value.
So being
how much
perfect.
am I prepared to pay above because I want to own that product for what it is.
So that's the thing, though. That's the thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand when it comes to Cuban cigars. They talk about the flaws of Cuban cigars when it comes to the production of it. Oh, it's plugged. Oh, the draw's tight. Oh, it's tough. So on, so on, and so forth. It's too heavily packed. I can't get a draw on this one. I got to smoke another one. But it's a luxury product. It's not meant to be perfect.
Yeah.
New World cigars, it's almost like it almost feels mechanical.
It's the dairy milk of the chocolate market. What it's going to be like. It's going to be perfect every single time, right? But it's never going to be more than a bar of dairy milk. I was in Cigar of St James's many, many months ago, and there was a very nice man there. He was all the rest of it. We were having a good chat, and I couldn't help but notice he had a very impressive watch on. And I wasn't sure what it was, but I had a good idea. And I didn't want to embarrass the guy, but I turned around to him at some point and said, "Look, I don't want to embarrass you, but, is that an FP Journée?" He went, "Yeah, it's the double tourbillon."
God damn.
Right, it was a piece of art.
What the hell?
But he was wearing it under...
He was trying to hide it.
Like, he was hiding it, right? Not for any security
but he was
whatever.
just,
And he said, I'm quite impressed that you know what that is. And I'm like, dude, you're wearing like £500,000+ worth of watch there. He said, yeah, but it gives me pleasure every time I put it on. Not, look at me, I've got £500,000 wrapped around my wrist. I take pleasure every single time I put it on. So what does the product make me feel about me?
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's luxury. What does that product add to my life? You know, we sit there, maybe with a Cohiba once a year, and we sit there and we puff and we think, how fortunate am I to be smoking something so special? To be part of something that's so special. What does that product make me feel about me?
Well, we're gonna start wrapping this up, but to end this, I think the point I want to bring it back to Cohiba versus Cohiba. I think that's one of the fundamental aspects of Cohiba and what it is, and to have the brand infringe in that way. I'm starting to understand what you mean when they say they do need to focus on, you know, working on the trademark and making sure that they're protecting it, because it is a valuable trademark. It is something that they've worked extremely hard on developing, and that aspect of luxury cannot be understated. The Cohiba cigars in the States are not luxury. They are not luxury by any means.
It's a marketing ploy.
Yeah,
in order to sell to sell sticks.
It's literally just that. And honestly, I do think it's becoming a little embarrassing for them to continue using the brand, because everyone knows it's not a real Cohiba. It's just, as you said, a marketing ploy. But before we start wrapping up, I just want to know, Alex, do we have any comments or any things that people want to say?
No one's directly asked really any questions. There was one comment from Mr. Epicurean Smokes.
Oh, hey, nice to see you again.
Which I thought was quite interesting. It mentions, he says Opus X is a luxury, Fuente is premium. What do you reckon? How far down the chain can you make it? Like, can a product be a luxury within a premium brand?
No, because remember the product, there is, as we said earlier in the discussion, there is a big difference between product and brand. Products come and go. Brands live on forever, and it is the brand that is luxury, not the actual product. Again, to be clear, over a period of time, and I don't know what that period of time is, or maybe it's already passed, there could be an argument to say that some of these high-end New World cigars may be defined or may meet the criteria of being luxury. But I honestly believe that the people to whom they're marketing to, where they sell the majority of sticks, don't care. And I honestly don't think the producers care either, because they're in the business of selling sticks. And the more sticks they can sell, the more money they're going to make. And as far as I'm aware, if they really needed to, they could just keep pumping more and more out. They really could. I don't think they're restricted in the same way as Habanos, right? I just don't think they are.
I don't think so. I mean, there are certain lines of cigars which have limits in terms of how much they can produce, but overall...
That they choose to produce or can produce. In other words, do they not have the materials? Because I believe there's just indefinite, especially as a lot of these things...
I think it depends. I mean, there are certain tobacco strains and certain kinds of wrapper leaves and so on which are difficult to produce and take a long time. But in general, yeah, they can produce as much as they want. However, there are certain caveats and certain exceptions. But that's the difference. With Cuba, that doesn't exist. You know, they could produce 1 million Guantanameras, I guess. You know, they could produce millions of them. But that's not a cigar. We're talking about actual premium or luxury hand-rolled cigars. And when it comes to hand-rolled cigars, Cuba does have a top-end limit of how much they can produce, because they literally do. I mean, they say, well, this year we were only able to produce 50 million cigars. That's the limit. That's it. That was it. That's all they could produce. With New World cigars, it's like, well, yeah, we could produce a bit more if we want to. Overall, there are individual areas which may have certain limits, but overall, when you're comparing country by country, yeah, you can produce whatever you want.
I'd like to add a caveat to what you were saying, Alex, and that is a product doesn't have the ability to, by itself, elevate a brand from premium to luxury. What it does do, it has the ability to impact the luxury status of a brand and reduce it down to premium. And I'm going to give you a very famous case, and that was when Mercedes launched the original A-Class, which was globally accepted as being absolute dross. If you remember rightly, this was a car that if you went around the corner in more than 20 miles an hour, you ended up on your roof, right? And what it allowed people to do was buy Mercedes who had never previously thought about buying a Mercedes. And what would happen is they would pull up at the lights and they would be there in their £13,000 A-Class praying to God that they stayed upright, and they'd pull up alongside a guy driving his SL, which cost him 150 grand. And he's looking over at this kid driving this car, and he's thinking, that guy's driving the same brand as me. And the kid in the car is thinking, this car's crap, and I should have stayed with my Ford Fiesta. And when that happened, it's the only time ever that Mercedes dropped from being one of the top 2 producers of cars in Germany to being the 3rd. They fell behind both BMW and Audi. Instantly, because they released a bad car, it reduced them from being a luxury brand to a premium brand, and it cost them billions to elevate them, to get themselves elevated back up again.
Yeah.
You know, they had to make sure that everything that they produced was top notch.
Yeah.
But the damage had still been done, and the very fact that we still talk about it is something that will forever be, you know, in people's memories. So you have to be very, very careful when you release a product that you don't actually do detrimental damage to your brand, because as I said earlier, brands go on forever.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I'd say no more comments? No? Well, in that case, that one, this one.
Whichever one you want. Over there if you want, I just can't see you.
I'll look at this one. On that note, thank you guys for tuning in to another live stream. Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you whilst you struggle through your Salomons.
Certainly wasn't a struggle. Just like to one final shout out to my son. Happy birthday for tomorrow, Josh. And,
happy birthday, Josh.
And thank you and your lovely sister for this truly fantastic cigar. It's been great to smoke it in such great company. And I've enjoyed absolutely every second of it. So thank you very much indeed.
No, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you for joining me.
Just saying, would it have killed you to have done this in Monaco? Like, you know, we could have done it in shorts and a t-shirt, but I don't want to dwell on that. That's fine. I'm over it now.
Seriously?
I'm over it. That's fine.
Anyway,
thanks,
guys.
Again. We'll do it again, and next time we'll do it in slightly warmer climates, right?
Yeah, we'll. No. Anyway, thank you guys. Why, man? Yeah, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next live stream. And yeah, Stephen, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Ooh.